All right, waiting for YouTube to queue up. What's going on, YouTube? Hopefully we are live. There we go. Mute that. Perfect.
I built the best home gym ever, and I'm going to.
I think we're live. Okay. Now let me just hit the recording. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matthew Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming massive censorship. So if you want to support this show, please share it, leave a review, share it with your friends, do what you can to get the word out there. Consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. And the show is also backed up on mattbelair.com, where you can contribute a couple bucks a month if you want, like Patreon, because that's deleted too. Or you can even get it for free if you just email me, matt@zenathlete.com. Today's guest unpacks the mental fitness practices and reflective questions shaping the lives of some of the most successful and brilliant thinkers in the world. He is the author of Personal Socrates, a best-selling book exploring the pointed questions that stimulate our mental fitness and teach us how to direct our internal narrative to work for us instead of against us. He studies the prompts and practices of legends such as Kobe Bryant, Robin Williams, and many others to bring clarity, intentionality, and possibility to every aspect of your life. Welcome to the show, my friend, Marc Champagne.
Mr. Belair, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Bro, I'm so stoked we're doing this. I'm so glad we're chatting. When we did the first podcast, we talked about making this a book, and now it is a book. This is the
You're
inside.
right.
Remember that? Yeah. And I was like, bro,
Yes.
you got to make this a book. So I just loved our first podcast and staying in touch and your story. So why don't we start a little bit about that? Because we were diving in a little bit before, because you were in one world doing something, then you
Yeah.
transition and you do the journaling app, and now it's transitioned to the book. So you've kind of been someone that I've respected because you came out of like the corporate guaranteed money type of situation, and you start to follow your gut, follow your soul, and then now it's just been evolving and you've been adapting
Yeah.
and just doing great work. So I'd love for you to share a bit about that story.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the last time we spoke would have been probably more at the height of when I was running Keo, a guided journaling app. And probably soon after that, that whole business and app exploded in all the wrong ways. And I had to delete an app that had reached 86.9 million people. But before that, just to back, if list,
86.9 million.
yeah, App Store
Wild.
impressions. It was
Amazing.
wild. But before that, just for people that maybe haven't seen our first episode, I was in the corporate space. I was doing brand management and sales in the pharmaceutical industry, out of all places, and I left that because throughout the whole time in that world, around 8 years or so, I always had some sort of mental fitness practice. And for me, it was a journaling practice or a reflection practice. And I started to get really frustrated with the digital options that were out there, because I was traveling a lot and didn't want to carry around an extra notebook and so forth. So I was using like Apple Notes and essentially word processors, and eventually got to the point where I'm like, there's got to be a better way to take content, which for me were prompts. I'd be reading, books or material and grabbing the prompts that these people were reflecting on, and then I would journal on them in the next morning. And I said, there's got to be a way to combine that content with a guided flow, just like the meditation apps are doing. And at that time, Headspace and Calm were really taking off with kind of the mainstream. And that's what sparked the departure. And so I wasn't leaving in a sense of like I didn't like my job or anything like that. It was more of I would regret not trying this. And as I went down the path, like I said, we launched the app. We reached a ton of different people, primarily through a lot of just brand collaborations and bringing in a lot of really rich content, so that when we launched it, it was full. The app wasn't just empty with placeholder content or coming soon. It was loaded up with content, and it wasn't necessarily all of ours. It was people that had credibility in the space. But long story short, financially, we couldn't figure it out. We weren't developers. The marketing plan and the strategy, all that stuff worked really well. But we went through probably about 3 different development teams throughout that journey, and eventually got to the point where we were with a local team in Hamilton, actually, which meant that it was costing a lot more money as well. And we got to the point where we were mentally and financially maxed out. And we had to make a tough decision that, you know what, I think this is probably where we're going to have to end this option for this type of work. Both myself and my brother-in-law and co-founder, young families, and that was weighing on us. So I know for me personally, the decision was really hard to make, but it felt right in the sense that I had found the right work. And I'm trying to bring this all back, because at that time, the backup plan, if this thing wasn't going to work, would be to go back to the old job, but that no longer felt right. And I wanted to stay in the preventative mental fitness or mental health side of thing with my work. But the question was then how, and here we are.
Oh man. Well, that's a really amazing story. And I think it just illustrates the importance of, that first leap of following your gut, because even though, the app wasn't successful in the way that you could have hoped, where you could have done this service for other people and then it financially compensate you and your family so you're supported. That's obviously the dream. But it didn't work out exactly that way. But you still had all these impressions and you were still doing what the mission was. But then you had to adapt to the way it was being delivered. And so you didn't go
Yeah,
back to the way it was. And I always say to people, the matrix will always take you back. The doors will be wide and open. And if you leave, they're going to try to make it even more enticing for you to come back. So it's
yeah,
okay to go out on a leap and not be successful in the way that you imagined. You're going to learn from it. You're going to change, and then you're going to adapt. And so when we were talking in the last podcast, and we were friends, like, bro, you got to write a book. I was like, this sounds amazing. Like, if we're not going to do the app, I feel like it would be such a powerful book. There's not a lot out there. So let's talk a little bit about Personal Socrates and the importance of journaling and self-reflection. I don't think that self-reflection is a process that as many people should do. Like mental training and sport, they should do that, but it's not popularized. It's not mainstream yet. So I feel like
hmm
not everyone's doing it. I was coaching a young kid today, and I love coaching kids because you teach them basics about mindset and clearing their mind and visualizing and reflecting. And I was like, and I told him, just grab a journal and start processing these things, because one of the
yeah,
analogies I gave is, if you go through life, your body's kind of like your hard drive, your computer. So if it's bunged up with all this emotional stuff and you don't process it, you don't clear it in journaling, reflection, prayer, meditation, some sort of channel, you're going to stress out the body because it's going to hold that energy. Like when you have a
totally.
negative experience, you hold the energy, you feel it and it sinks. So you got to like process it and move it in a way. And reflecting is amazing on processing negative emotions, but knowing who you are. And that's the key. So I'd love for you to speak a little bit on that.
Well, just on that point, I mean, the other thing that comes to mind for me, or the example I often use, is just the idea that, like, we need to create space in our minds. It's like, if you imagine a physical room and you jam that room just full of boxes and things and stuff, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, I need to go get that book or that lamp. I know it's in there somewhere. You're gonna get it. You're gonna eventually find it, but ultimately you're gonna exhaust all this energy. You're gonna have to empty out the room. You're gonna be pissed off, frustrated. I mean, our minds are the same thing with all these emotions and thoughts and decisions, but we can organize it. We can help release and, like you said, process and create some space, and then be able to actually retrieve the answers we're seeking, because they're there. We just need to let our minds do the magic, and that's where I think mental fitness is really helpful. And to me, the umbrella is mental fitness. Journaling is one of them. And anything related to mental health or mental performance or mental resiliency, it all falls under the umbrella. And for me, it's so funny, because I completely forgot, but I remember it clear as day now that I remember that conversation. You said you need to write a book about this, but I completely forgot that you said that, because there was a gap there between the deleting the app and actually the idea for the book. Because that time, I'll never forget it. I was in a co-working space in Toronto, by myself, or I should say, not with a team. We had a small team of 5, kind of scattered around the world. Sitting there with my laptop, looking at the Apple dashboard, and I see that 86.9 million App Store impressions. And the next step is to hit delete from App Store. And all the wrong questions start to come up. Like, how could we fail at such a colossal level? Like, what would my family think? What would my ex-colleagues think? That I remember when I said I was leaving, it was almost like they were saying, oh, I have an idea too. Like, you're so courageous for doing it. And then now I'm going to, show back up with kind of like the tail between my legs, um, which I didn't. But I mean, those were the feelings and the emotions. And at the same time, I'm living in Toronto, Canada, one of the most expensive cities in our country. And I'm living or renting at that point, renting a place that we never even liked to begin with. It was always supposed to be temporary. We're in an area that's not really us. And I'm thinking, I've got, I think, a 2-year-old at that point. Like, how much of the stress is he feeling? Even though as parents, we're doing everything possible not to, for him to feel that. And I could, because I was working in the mental health space when I left the pharmaceutical industry. So I knew the signs of slipping into a depression. And that's where I was going, because it was the first time in my life where I had no plan forward. And I knew that I was lit up by this work, and this is the work that, I was meant to do. But now I just deleted the business that was keeping me in there. So after kind of weeks of just literally waking up feeling physically sick and not great, I did everything possible to go back to, well, wait a second, I've interviewed hundreds of incredible humans, yourself included. And all of these people are asking very different questions. And they have these practices to pop them into the present moment and to leverage gratitude. So I started doing that to the point where I paused the narrative just long enough to ask, what do I truly want for my life? And that was the question that saved me. And I share that because that was the catalyst to for me at least, the realization that no matter who we are, where we're at in life, we're all one question away from a completely different life. For me, that was the one. And that's the whole idea behind Personal Socrates, is that just like the app, I'm providing stories and narratives and use cases from people like the Picassos of the world, or Jane Austen, or Maya Angelou, and doing that through questions so that someone will resonate with Picasso or Maya Angelou or any of the other 40 profiles, just enough to stop and think and get clear, right? And I think you mentioned it, like, who am I right now? Who am I striving to become? And what's the gap? Who do I need to speak with? What do I need to do? Like, we're all asking questions. I feel like our lives are just a series of questions and answers. It's just, are we intentionally asking good questions? And I think a quality question links back to the timing of it. It's got to land, right? Like, for me, that big question saved me from a depression and set me on the path I'm on now. But if you ask me that same question now, it serves as a good check-in, but it doesn't have the same power that it did before, right? So yeah, so that was the idea behind the book, and saying, you know what, just because I had to leave a vehicle behind, essentially, which was the app in this space, it doesn't mean that I'm exiting the space of mental fitness. And then the idea of, well, why don't I write a book about this? I mean, the thing with the books, no matter how much technology we throw out there, they still have some sort of staying power. And even myself, I mean, I read on Kindle and things like that, but there's still something about holding a physical book. And also that I realize at the end now, writing a book, as you know, just really clarifies your own thoughts and, protocols and principles. And my book looks like a university textbook. It's just like highlighted and flagged all over the place to help, when I'm working with people one-to-one or teams, like I'm using it as a workbook almost.
That's amazing. Well, there's so much wisdom in that story there, and I love how that you responded to it. And you also, I just want to highlight this: at any point, we are one question away from a different life. And there's so many quotes out there that just talk about how the wisdom of life comes from the higher quality question you have. So it's not about having the answers; it's just at arriving at a more important question, a more meaningful question, and then to
Yeah.
contemplate on that. And it also illustrates the idea that when we're moving towards something that fulfills us, something that we know that we want to do or provide, it's not always going to be smooth sailing. There's always going to be adaptation. There is much less certainty in the result that you're going to get, although we hope for lots of money. So, like I said at the beginning, whoa, I forgot it was big pharma. I was like, you're like, that's the way. So you got out of like, whoa, something doesn't feel right here. And imagine being in that space now with all the things going on. You'd be like, I don't
Yeah.
know if I want to be a part of that. But on the flip side, you decide, you know what, I feel like reflection and asking important questions is something that can benefit people. How do I make a living and support my family? And there's no guarantees, but there is a guarantee in going to big pharma and corporate and things like that. So
Yeah.
it shows just spiritual integrity, but it ends up being worth it for your soul. And you have to continually adapt. But you'll notice how the universe will respond, and you'll get these different experiences that happen that know that you're supported, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have the moments where you fail and you need to try again. Right.
Oh, for
And,
sure.
sports has always taught me that, you just fail until you get it. And
Yeah.
so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some elements to mental fitness or some other questions that, you use as a practice. How do we integrate that as a practice? Because people say journaling. Some of the guys are like, I'm not going to journal. I'm not a wuss or something. And then some other
Yeah.
people might be like, well, how do I do it? How do I go through? And in your book is a great way for just having basic prompts. Right. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious if you can talk about some of those ideas.
Well, I mean, I wrote the book from the perspective of what I knew I needed and what worked for me, in the sense of how do I maintain, how do I develop and also maintain a consistent mental fitness practice. So that's why the book is written in a format of profiles, where each profile is anywhere from 3 to 5 pages long. And I mean, I recorded the audiobook in this booth, so I know they're only 10 to 12 minutes long. So it's not a huge investment of time, but it's enough that if you pick up the book, and it doesn't have to be this book, but just pick up something to start your day and fuel your mind with positive and good mental nutrition, right? Just like we strive to do, or I hope we strive to do with our food, right? Like, we all realize if we're going to eat like shit for days in and days out, that we're going to start feeling that, and then disease is going to show up. I mean, it's pretty clear that that's the formula for a situation like that. Well, it's the same thing with our minds, right? Like, first thing we do and tune into the news or social media or emails. I mean, we're already starting the day in like a reactive mode, and we're not starting on our own terms. So
Yeah,
for
yeah, and
me,
Mark,
yeah, go
in
for it.
Buddhism, that's what one of their main teachings was mental nutriments, right? What you're feeding your mind on a
Oh,
daily basis. So they were really adamant about that, right? What you're feeding your mind, because there's also like the five gates: what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're smelling, all these different things. So
yeah.
being very deliberate, because you can be deliberate with those things. So, yeah, please continue.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So yeah, so doing something to, you know, put your mind first and start the day on your own terms, and start your day with a prime mind. I mean, and we're all different, but I would highly suggest for people to list out and think of the buckets. Like, what can I do from a reflection standpoint? Journaling is a go-to for me, obviously, and it's funny because when I was starting the app, I used to get this all the time, like, oh, you're talking about the 12-year-old girl writing her diary about the boy at school. And I'm like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but no, I'm talking about all these people that you're reading their books, watching their TED Talks. I mean, they're taking time to still their mind and think. And I really think, especially right now, the art of reflection and thinking is almost a superpower that I feel very few people are accessing. And because we live in a very autopilot society, that everything is really designed to be as efficient as possible, or we want to be as productive as possible, and like, here's the flow and blah blah blah. And then we get into this mode where we don't stop and just ask a question and start to think, right? Because as soon as curiosity is gone, we're not growing as a human. I mean, if you think about it, we're all born curious. I mean, we have to be curious just to learn how to walk. We have to be curious to reach out and grab the table to stand up, right? Or take the first step. It's curiosity. And I know you've got one kid, right? Yeah. I mean, and I've got a 5.5-year-old, and it's like question central nonstop, right? All these great questions. And often I'm sitting back and I'm like, That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm glad you're asking it. But at some point, then kids are sent into the education system, and this is not to harp on the education system, but the hands start to go down, right? People aren't asking as many questions, and there's fear of being judged and so forth, and a whole host of other things. And eventually, a curiosity just starts to get stifled until we hit some sort of wall. Something happens, something explodes in our lives, and we're forced to ask questions again. And then usually that's kind of like that midlife point, and it's like, well, am I really doing the things that I want to be doing? Am I really the person I want to be? So my goal, though, with all of this work is to try to shorten that gap and keep ourselves asking questions, and guide and teach people how to ask good questions. And in order to do that, from my study, at least from the interviews and as well as the people of the past, you have to have a clear mind. It's really hard to ask good questions when your mind is jammed full. And one example, there's a profile on a guy by the name of Chip Conley, who he was the founder of one of the largest boutique hotel chains in North America called Joie de Vivre. He ran that for about 24 years and then sold it. And he was asked by the founders of Airbnb before they were as big as they are now. Brian Chesky specifically said, Chip, can you come on board as our mentor? You know, and he said, yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. You guys are revolutionizing the hospitality scene, and I'm coming out of that. Let's do it. And he shared the story. He said, when I got there, I got into the meetings, and he's like, I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. It's like there's all this technology going on, and most of the people in the room were in their early 20s, and here's Chip. I think he was in his 50s at that point, and he just felt so disconnected from the pulse of that organization, that he's like, if I'm going to be useful for this team, I can't just be the mentor, I have to be the intern. And to be the intern, I need to be curious, and I need to be present, and I need to ask really good questions. And then he started to then share with me, he said, this is the importance of a daily check-in. Because for him, answering questions like, how fresh and alive do I feel today, is such a great predictor or view into what's actually going on, because the feelings are there. If you're answering that, I don't feel very fresh, I feel stressed. Well, why? What's fueling that, and what can I do to acknowledge that and release it or rechannel it, like whatever it is. But one thing we can guarantee, if we don't stop to do something, the feeling's still there, and it's just going to keep dragging into the day. It affects how we think, it affects our mood, and then it piles into our heads, right? So just even short check-ins, if you're not doing anything at this point while your coffee or your tea's brewing, like, how do I want to show up today? And set one word intention, or set a one word theme for the year. That's enough usually to get started. Then, as Matt, I mean, like, then a whole other world opens up, and there's just so many different practices that we can jump into to continue to support that journey, right?
That's amazing, man. I absolutely love all that. And sometimes it's just a simple reminder. It's like we know what we're supposed to do, but we don't do it. And so how can we make it an easy practice? Because even when you said that question to me, I was like, I don't ask myself that. Like, I'll do a daily journaling, but just that little one is like, how fresh and alive do I feel today? And just check
Yeah.
in. And what that does is bring awareness, because if you do that each and every day, you're going to start to notice some themes, and then you can unravel where that stress comes from, and then you can respond to it. But if you aren't not taking an assessment and you kind of just, let it go, it's going to get worse. Just like if you let your health go for a duration of time, you can get away for a while, but there might be a kickback from reality,
Hmm.
from all those choices that you've made, that compound over time. And so I think that that's a really wonderful practice. And I like in the book, you have about 3 categories. Is get clear. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, who am I? Then living intentionally, and then expanding your possibility. And all of this will form from knowing who you are. All of life will unravel more aligned with, if you're really clear on who you are and what's most important to you, and how you want to navigate things, right? Being a father, it changes things for me. And when I was younger, I kind of did the same thing. I just thought about what's most important to me. But now those things when I was younger that were most important are not now.
Hmm.
But that's because I was reflecting when I was younger, and I was able to experienced a lot of the things that I'm proud of today. But now that I'm a father, those goals and who I want to be and how I want to express in this life are very different from continuing the reflection process. It's an ongoing process of navigating life. It's kind of like you're on this endless sea and you're constantly adjusting from trying new things, from then reflecting on, oh wow, that didn't work, or that
Yeah.
wasn't what I thought, or that was amazing, I'd like to do that again, and I'd like to expand it in this different way. So the more aligned we can become, it's just so key. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your process for getting clear. People like, who am I, what do I want to do, what's my life purpose? Like when you're in big farm, I like, okay, I'm going to do this, but wait, I got this
Yeah.
paycheck and I got kids. That's a lot of stuff to let go of, including fear and uncertainty. So, I commend your bravery for being able to make the leap.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it definitely was not easy. Well, and I should say, like the clarity, we have to start with clarity, but it comes from the formula that I've seen play out over and over again with anyone I've interviewed that I really respect, and then it also marries up with the Socratic method. And that's what you see in the structure of the book, and that it was only revealed to me probably halfway through writing. I'm like, this is it. And it was revealed to me in a way of like, wow, when I was struggling to write these profiles, the ones that were the most challenging, it's because I didn't spend enough time first getting clear. I just jumped into it. And when you just jump into something, you can make some progress, but eventually, any project is like this, there's something happens, and it doesn't get better until we pause to get clear on what the hell just happened, right? And I see this playing out over and over again. So if you take clarity plus intentional thought or intentional actions to support that newfound clarity, then the third part of the book and the third part of that formula and expansion of possibility just happens by default. Because again, you've organized your mind and you can see the path. It's there. It's always been there. It's just now we can see it. So, for me, it always starts with getting clear. And I'm reminded of something I learned from James Clear, who's well known in the habit formation and system space. And he's one of the profiles. And just answering a question like, am I climbing the right mountain? Right? Because we can feel busy and feel like we're doing good work, but is it work on the right mountain, right? Instead of getting to the peak and be like, oh shit, that's actually not what I really want. So just getting clear on, well, what would the ideal day look and feel like for me? Not to say that it's all going to just play out in one shot, but if you could have everything go your way, like how would you feel each day and what would that look like? Like be granular with it. And it's a fun journaling exercise because it automatically puts your mind in a state of possibility and creation and excitement, because you're thinking of obviously of what would light you up. But that's a good predictor, at least to do a check-in to see, okay, well, if this is how I want my day to play out and the type of people I want to be speaking with, the type of work I want to be doing, then I look at my calendar and look at what's actually happening, well, there's the disconnect. And then that's when the questions around intentionality come in. Okay, well, how can I make some adjustments so that, at least I can start moving closer and closer to the person that I'm striving to become, or that resonates, or the desires I have for my life, right? And then just bit by bit, we just keep checking in with ourselves. Like, okay, what am I hearing? When I feel the most, I guess you could say, stressed or overwhelmed, where things just feel like there's a lot going on, the easiest thing to stop that for me is just a quick gratitude practice, because then you flip your mind into nice neurochemical cocktail of serotonin and dopamine, and send a message to someone that means something to you. But then the next thing I do is just answer the question, like, what am I hearing in the whispers? What am I pretending not to know right now? And usually, again, we have the answers to all this. We just need to slow it down a bit. It's like when you go for a run and all of a sudden you have all these new ideas that are popping, or ideas in the shower. So our minds are still, right? So starting there to understand and just continuing to check in, then we can move into making those course corrections. Something as simple as and it's Friday as when we're recording this. I do this every Friday. I usually do it around 3 p.m. just so I'm not like trying to rush out to close off the day. And it serves as an amazing bookend to the week, and also allows me to come into the weekend just really present and there for myself and my family. And it's 3 prompts. What did I learn this week? What would I have changed this week? And what can I celebrate about this week? And I guarantee if this is the only mental fitness you're doing each week, just starting there, you do this for a couple weeks and you're going to feel the benefits of those 3 questions that take 10 minutes to answer. I've said a lot. I'll leave it there.
I love that, man. I was taking notes. I actually had that in one of my questions. I remember that from our first podcast, your Friday practice, and I'm glad you're still doing it. And I like how you're speaking about it in a very succinct formula. This is an ongoing practice for navigating life. And when I'm working with clients, one of the things that I like to do, and if you're listening to the podcast, you should definitely do this, get a bracelet or a watch or something external and learn to monitor what's going on in your world. So, one of my first mentors was Michael Lozier. He wrote the book, The Law of Attraction. And, the simple definition is I attract to my life whatever I give my attention, energy, and focus to, whether negative or positive. And so if you're speaking about negative things, or you're complaining, or you're doing all these different things, you can then just stop and ask, what do I want? So for me in sports, if I don't want to fall on the back flip, right, I can't be visualizing that before I go, because I'm going to create my reality,
Totally.
right? So in life, it's just a bit slower. So we don't get that immediate feedback. So I want to land the back flip, or I want to be successful in this, or I want to change my internal dialogue to be whole and complete, even though I quote unquote failed at my first attempt. But I'm not a failure. It was just that one didn't work out. That's okay. And so, but you can go a little bit further with that into monitoring your emotions. So it's learning to be aware what you're speaking and how you're feeling. So if you feel yourself constantly anxious or consciously depressed, or consistently, say, okay, oh, I notice I'm anxious. Great. You take that bracelet, flip it to the other side, and just take 3 deep breaths and set the intention. I want to feel a little bit more whole and complete right now. And just in doing that, it starts to break this unconscious pattern. And I really enjoy coaching younger people, because it helps me, and just like writing the book, it helps you become more clear. And coaching this younger person today, I was talking to him about how he's got an influence in one of his coaches, and his coaches are like one of those negative feedbacks. If you don't do it right, you kind of get yelled at and benched and things like that. And I was trying to explain, like, you've got this external reality of this coach who's doing something, and you're gonna just automatically feel crappy. Right. Even I said, I'm 36. I know martial arts. And somebody says, Matt, I see him podcast, you're a loser and you're so wrong. Immediately, I might feel negative for a second. But then I know how to stop that, because it just unconsciously happens, because it's an uncomfortable thing to be made fun of, and for people to do hurtful things to you, but I've learned over time to not ride that out. Am I going to ride it out for 5 seconds, 1 minute, a day, 10 years, right? And so we can really influence our internal states, and we can take control of that, through our process of just stopping for a second, right? Knowing who we are, connecting to our breath, connecting to what's real important. And then that's where we're adding our will of who we truly are, because that fulfillment is never going to come from outside of you. My self-worth, self-love is never going to come from external validation. And if I'm looking for that, it's always going to be empty. So I got to learn how to fill myself up from within. And having this process is so key. And I feel like of all the self-help stuff out there, and the people talking about different processes, what you share and how you articulate it, and what's available in the book, and even from our first podcast, that is such an essential process for people to experience and then integrate. Kind of like, working out isn't that complicated, but if you do it consistently, whatever one you choose is going to be helpful for your physical health. Well, this is something that's very important for your mental and emotional and spiritual well-being as you navigate life.
Well, thank you. I mean, but this is actually why I'm hanging on the Socratic method, because for me, the questions offer that pause that you're describing. They give us the luxury to just stop and take a different course, or make a different decision or process, or whatever you need in that moment. Without the question, or without that consistent mental training that gave you the pause in the first place, then we just continue on autopilot. And I remember when I was explaining the concept to my publisher, and the Joey, he's got I think he has a minor in philosophy, and he's like, oh, you're talking about the Socratic method. And I'm like, well, I understand I know of Socrates, like most people, the guy that asks all the questions type thing, but that's as far as it went. And I got super curious because as soon as I started to really dig into Socrates, the insights that came up, or I guess the excitement was, well, here's a method that's literally been around for essentially like the beginning of time. It stood the test of time. We still use it. We don't really know that we're using it, which is essentially just ask a big question and ask a series of follow-up questions to bring more clarity to the situation, to get us to the root cause of whatever we're trying to sort out, right? And I remember thinking, well, then, like, why don't we use this more intentionally? And then I started to go down the rabbit hole and see what scholars were writing about the Socratic method. And they had all these question types, like 6 different question types, and probing assumptions and clarifying thinking and so forth. And I can't even state them all with you on the show. They're in the introduction of the book, but that was the problem. Like, well, we don't operate in a way of, okay, I'm in a situation, I need to ask those probing questions, or I need to question the question, or I need to, like, we just don't think like that. So I was thinking, well, then how do we just take the general concept of the Socratic method to ask the questions and link it up to that mental fitness formula of we need to get clear, intentional, and then expand what's possible. And that's what I try to do with whether it's the podcast, the book, or any of the work that I'm doing, is just to link up almost like a sommelier of questions. It's like I'm trying to link up the good bottle of wine with a great meal to make the experience even better. Let's bring in the question that will work in this situation, and it'll probably be different next month because the situation has changed, or we have changed, or we have evolved. So the idea for the book has always been, and even the app was to evolve with the person that's using it, right? And that's why I suggest, like, don't you read the introduction, but then just look at the table of contents and see which prompt or which profile sparks your mind, because that's probably where you need to go right away. Get clear, obviously. I mean, keep that in mind, but go where your mind is taking you, and then you'll bounce around, right?
Yeah, I love that. And, I can see it just as like a little coffee table book for those who don't, do journaling, but it's the idea of making it easy. And that's why I love the app. I was using it for a bit, but what I don't like is technology. I like writing it down. So I'm less
Yeah,
inclined to go on my phone. Some people will, and that's a great method, but it's the idea to show up and do those things. And whether you use these questions, you might come up with another question, but the idea is that you're engaging in that, just like fitness, right? You might start with, oh, I like CrossFit, or I like TRX, or I like jogging.
yeah,
And then he's like, hey, today, what do you want to do? Do you want to jog? Do you want to lift up some weights? Do you want to do some boxing? And like, oh, I'll try this. But then you realize there are infinite possibilities. But the important thing is to show up, and then how you're
totally.
going to cultivate your own questions and your own reflection. And that's what we're really trained out of in our society, is pausing and reflecting and steering and being intentional. And that's how we apply our will, and that's how we apply our
Hmm.
spirit to our life. Because if you're just running your life unconsciously on autopilot, you're not directing your soul, your essence, your spirit to what you want to create. And it's sad how many people think that they can't do that. If you can imagine your big pharma guys or anybody working these jobs, they think, oh, well, I got to do this because I'm making money, this and that. But the truth is, there's always a way to create what your heart and your soul want for you. But there's a
Yeah,
lot of letting go, because it is much more uncertain. It is frightening, but it's certainly possible. And that's where we want to develop that courage. And when we know who we are more and we keep doing this, it's going to be that fuel, that
yeah.
energy, that excitement, and that will. But if you're very unclear, right? If I'm going off a huge snowboard jump and I don't know if I'm going to spin front side, if I'm going to spin back side, if I'm going to spin upside down, and I don't know what I'm going to do, it's going to be hard for me to direct my energy and my focus and my intent to the thing that I want to create. And the more it's very finite, so the hardest trick possible, by the what they're doing in snowboarding now in the Olympics is just absurd.
Yeah, it's been
But
fun
they're
to
going off this
watch.
crazy jump, and then they're like, I'm going to do 3 backflips and like 4 spins, and there's a moment where they initiate that thing. So they're waiting and go boom, and all of that
Yeah.
energy, that will and focus and intent goes to that form of creation. And
Hmm.
so I feel like we can apply that from to our lives using this process. And so it's the invitation to start and making it simple and demystifying it.
Yeah, and just like speaking of snowboarding and just the Olympics, since it's relevant right now, like I think this aligns to just our lives and showing what's possible. I just remember I was watching the the big air and whatnot in snowboarding, and I remember them um, doing the spin moves and thinking. I remember there was a time when like the 1080 was the craziest, the biggest thing possible. It still is, but when did the numbers just keep going up and up and up, right?
No.
It blows my mind to see like the evolution and what's possible, right? Or even like when Tony Hawk did the first, I think he was the first one to do it on a skateboard, right?
Yeah,
Um,
900.
a 900, you're right, the 900. Um, but now we're like we're way above that, and it's insane. And I think a lot of that, I mean, obviously the technology with the equipment as well and stuff has changed, but I would suspect a lot of it has to do with just the mind and knowing, okay, well, if that's possible, then we can push that, and then it just keeps stacking up. So yeah,
Yeah, and
and the
that's
only other thing, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that's the importance also of what you're doing is studying from people who've achieved things that are admirable to you. How did they do it? What questions did they ask? And this is when it gets into neuro linguistic programming. Is neuro is
Yeah.
how you think, right? What are your beliefs? What are your, how do you process life? Linguistic, how do you speak about what you do and your programming or your habits? And so here you're kind of getting in the mindset of people who are achieving things that we might want to create in our life, and it's inspiring us to figure out your own version. Right, here's one
Yeah.
way I did it, but you're going to do it a totally different way. You're going to have a totally different journey, but it is possible. And here's a framework for what you're going to navigate. Guaranteed you're going to navigate failure. Guaranteed you're
Yeah.
going to navigate uncertainty, right? But when you hit those moments,
Self-doubt.
self-doubt, right? Exactly. Here are some things that can help keep you going, but the journey is going to be your own. I can't do it for you. Just like in the same way for martial arts, I can't do your push-ups for you. Or if you do some cold training, I can't take the cold. We're both in that freezing cold together, and we
Yeah.
both learn from that experience in different ways.
So true. So true. And I think the only other thing that I've been so, I guess, surprised or impressed with just in this space, and especially with the interviews and the profiles in the book, is the simplicity. Like, this stuff isn't rocket science. I'm thinking of back to the Olympics. One of the profiles is on Apollo Ono, which he's a short track speed skater on the U.S. team. I think at the time, definitely, I think he still is the most decorated Winter Olympian. And I remember just going through um, or asking him, like, Apollo, like, how do you keep your mind primed to be, at this level and perform at this level? And his answer was so simplistic. He has post-it notes like in his closet or on his fridge with his goal or a reminder or that one word for the day, because like the rest of us, he's human. And if we just allow ourselves to not non-intentionally, I should say, walk through life, then we're gonna get programmed the other way. So we always need those reminders. And for me, that's the early morning coffee and just reading one page of maybe Stoic philosophy, just to reframe, reset, and keep my mind there. Then throughout the day, okay, yeah, you see the bracelet, or you see the book, or you see whatever it is, just to re-trigger your mind to stay focused on where you're trying to head. Because unfortunately, and the best example for this is health and nutrition. Like, if you walk into a grocery store and you walk in there aimlessly, you're going to come out with garbage food. It's set up for that. The end caps, the stuff that's being sold while you're waiting to pay. I mean, the whole majority of the middle of the grocery store is unhealthy, right? So it's just like, that's one example I think that anyone can resonate with. So it's just we have to be intentional with what we're doing, and it doesn't have to be super complicated, but we need those reminders.
Yeah, 100%. And when you're sharing there, it just gave me the idea that you're either programming your life and making conscious decisions, or you're getting programmed by some sort of other influence.
Yeah,
And it's
totally.
happening everywhere. It happens in our education system, and you weren't going to talk smack about it, but I can do a whole rant just talking all kinds of smack. But as especially now, public education to me is a very huge danger. And when I recognized this when I left school, I recognized that this thing was a danger, shattering
Yeah.
minds, had nothing to do with critical thinking, spirituality, mental health. It just had to do with rote memorization. And then you learn
Hmm.
a little bit more about how it's the Prussian system of obedience. And now it's getting even worse. And so I
Yeah.
invite people to check out the work of John Gatto. He was the teacher of the year a few times in New York and has made, really brilliant books on how we educate kids. And this is why there's a resurgence in homeschooling, because if you can train a kid and give them these tools, they're going to have them their whole life. I think this Aristotle quote that says, "Give me the boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man." And part of this process we're talking about here is something that should be installed. What I
Yeah.
teach in Zen Athlete should be installed, not because I created it. This is, my book is still behind the times, but ahead of the times.
Yeah.
Like I
So
took it
true,
from
right?
ancient stuff. Like, why is this not popular? Why aren't they teaching kids? It works, right? And so we want to be very mindful of how we educate ourselves in those mental nutriments, but also these influences. And the smartest thing about the book and what we're talking about is we're learning from teachers who are able to achieve certain things, and we're learning about the process. It's not this fill in the blanks and it's done. It's about your own
Hmm.
evolution of yourself, because like you said, you can ask one question today and get a totally different answer tomorrow. And the question you might ask might be a little bit different, but you're going to be able to navigate your emotional and spiritual and mental well-being. And it's not just this physical reality. And that's really what this push is. And a lot of the philosophies of the current times is a very material reality. There's no soul, there's no essence to anything. We
Yeah.
need to bring that essence back into the material and just allow the material to be what it is, right? And to
Yeah.
respond to the successes or failures we may have. And I'm curious if you can speak a little bit on just failure in general, and how you as a parent of a 2-year-old were able to say, okay, you know what, I need to provide for my family. I'm kind of used to having this level of income. How am I going to let go of this certainty and move towards this mission that I know is going to help a lot of people, but I don't know how I'm going to make a living or how I'm going to support my family and get over these fearful things that are coming up.
Hmm. Well, two things come to mind. One is a practice I call experience stacking, and it's in in its simplest form. It's taking time to think about the situations that we've conquered in life, because we often forget about those situations. We think of the things that have gone horribly wrong or whatever the case is. And, for me, even when deciding to write the book, I mean, I've never written a book before. It was a huge undertaking. Um, and I knew that. But at the same time, I was able to rely on, well, you know what? I took a leap out of the corporate world, created an app. Yeah, financially it didn't work out, but we reached a shitload of people. Most apps don't even reach 1,000 people. I mean, that we conquered, and I was a direct part of that. And there's just other examples as well, like even just like learning how to mountain bike and continually upgrading those skills and doing bigger and bigger things with a sport like that. And what that helped do was instill or bring the courage to take on the next challenge, and to be able to, when I had to delete the app and know, and spending time getting clear and knowing that this is the right work. And just like you said, for exercise, there's 1,000 different exercise or types of sports or things you can do in that field. It doesn't just mean, for me, it doesn't just mean it's just the app in the mental fitness field. There's so many different things I can do. So I just need to find that thing, and I need to trust that I am on the right path, because it does feel right. And I spent that time doing the work, but I need to trust the journey, and I need to be clear enough to see the right signs moving forward. So I think, you know, getting clear with that and trusting that you have those capabilities, layering on the past experiences to give that boost of motivation and taking action every day, then, that'll lead to something, right? And I'm still on that path. I'm still very much building, almost essentially a brand new mental fitness business that is essentially a one-man show, but incorporates all the elements that light me up, from the podcast that keep the practices fresh and new, to the book, to the one-on-ones, to the, the team mental fitness. It's all within the same ecosystem. And I don't have it nailed, but I know it's the right work, and I'm going to continue to evolve, right? But it's that mental fitness that's daily that serve as the check-ins for me. Say, okay, yeah, I am doing the right thing. Or when I'm down, okay, well, I know which practice that I can pull my mind out of that survivor mode and get into more of a creation state, and just constantly, pulling the right practice or the right prompt to do that, because that's essentially what these people are doing. It's not any more complicated than that. Whether it's the billionaire or the Michelin star chef or an award-winning designer, I mean, they're taking time to monitor what's happening in their minds, and they're prioritizing stillness so that they can see clearly, and that they can perform the right actions to support the right mountain to climb, right?
Yeah, man. Well, you said a lot of gold in there, and one of them was talking about failure. And what most people tend to do is remember the failure, analyze the failure, stew in the failure, right? So,
Yeah.
your mind be like, I failed in the app, and all my friends are, I didn't make any money, and just stew in that one thing that didn't work out, rather than, asking, what did I learn from this? Right. And great
Yeah.
athletes, Conor McGregor and great MMA athletes that have come back say, how did I learn? How am I going to come back from learning from this loss? How can I get better? It's a much more empowering frame, and we're really not taught how to do that. And I like how you talk about those check-ins, because a lot of people will talk about their life purpose, and from doing a lot of that type of coaching, I've discovered it's not an end goal, right? So your life
Hmm.
purpose isn't to start a journaling app, which you did, and
Yeah.
it's not to write a book, which you did. It's the continuous evolution of those daily check-ins. It's a
Yeah.
path, and you get these new experiences. But when you left, the pharma, you probably weren't thinking about, maybe you're thinking about the app, but then you maybe weren't thinking about the book. It's evolving through those daily check-ins. And so that's how you can know you're on track, because you're
Hmm.
consciously creating your life. You're not sitting back and letting it happen to you by default, which by default is
Yeah.
most people's engineering from their childhood and their possibilities of the easiest path to make material money and sustainability
Yeah.
and safety, right? Their
Yeah.
drive is usually just more materialism and more luxury, but that's not really a real authentic drive of who they are. It's a little bit
No.
of a different thing. And so when we are lining up that drive in our will, and we're creating life deliberately through those check-ins, it's okay if it's an off day, because we can compensate and respond to that by our reflective process. But if we're not reflecting, we could kind of get stuck for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and it all goes down the chute, and be like, what did I even do that year? And so,
Yeah.
that process really helps us to, consciously create our lives. And I think that, that last little bit there was really key.
Well, and there's also this comfort and this feeling of satisfaction when you do have the power to design your own life. And I learned a lot of this just when researching and studying Jane Austen, and taking the approach of, like, here's a legendary writer that her work, for example, didn't become famous or widely known until 50 years after she died. I didn't know that, but when I was going through her books and her work, like, the reflection that came to me was, her work is successful because of the way she writes, and all the different characters and the story and the plot and so far and so forth. And our lives are not much different. So if we can just pause and think about, well, who are the characters that have formed our lives, and what experiences have formed up into this point where we're at right now, and not to judge that. We've all come from different paths, and we've learned a ton of things, but now, right now, you have the power to write that next chapter. And you also have the power to decide, well, who are the characters in that chapter going to be? And, the end of the story may shift. And to your point, we're always evolving, but you can point yourself down a path that feels most right now. And we all have that opportunity to do that. And what I'm always so blown away with is that practice, or that little moment of journaling or reflection, literally can take only minutes. And those minutes of writing literally have the power to dictate years of our life in just 10 or 15 minutes of just, okay, this is where I want to go. And to me, that always, like, whenever I think of that, I'm like, where else can you get such a value add for like a time versus value, equation than something like that, right? And it's free.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm reminded of Van Gogh, which I went to that museum and it was incredible. And he was the same, where he didn't get famous until after he had died. And I wonder if he came back and you were able to speak with him. Do you wish you made more money? Do you wish you had done these different things? I'm pretty sure he would say, no, this is how my life evolved. And ideally, we
Yeah.
can we can be supported in our own journey and be financially abundant through the help and value we provide others. I feel like 90% of us who follow that path will be taken care of. I know everyone that I know that is doing that is taken care of financially. Some of them are very wealthy, some of them are in between, and some of them are on the lower end. It
Hmm.
just kind of depends, but they're very aligned with who they are. And they, even the people on the lower end, when you go to these other places, you're invited to these other things. You have this abundance. It's not like you're living
Yeah.
you lack. You still have abundance. You just quote unquote own it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can still have that quality of life. So they're putting the honest intent of who they are first over the materialism. And what you're talking about with just that reflective process, I'm just reminded of so many quotes that I can't exactly put my it's like measure twice, cut once kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
little
So
time,
true. Yep.
little sit in reflection as long as you need to go in a direction, because otherwise, where are you going? Right. And then
Hmm.
when you do that and you get a response, whether it's a success or failure, it doesn't matter. It's you're learning from it. Right. And
Exactly.
so it's like, do you want to play hockey or basketball? Which one do you enjoy? Sit and reflect, and then you're going to make a choice. And then you go do it. And you're like, you know what? I don't like basketball. Go try some hockey. So it's just like a simple rudimentary example. But when we get older, it's like, do you want to write a book? Do you want to learn about wellness, or do you want to learn about mindset? Okay, you like mindset stuff? Do you like neuro-linguistic programming, or do you like stoicism? Right? Ryan Holiday went into stoicism, and kind of made a life doing that. And so again,
Yeah.
you just really just continue this refining process of who you are through taking an action. And as you continue cycling it, it refines. Right. And
Exactly.
I've talked about this on the heading of a ship. Most people don't know if they're going north, east, south, or west. They're going with the school of fish. Right. And
Yeah.
so when you start to reflect, then you start to steer. You're like, oh, okay, I want to go north. And then it's like northwest. And then it just refines each and every day. And there's no set end. It's just a compilation of experiences. And when you do this, you notice these experiences that the creator God puts in your way, that you go, oh, interesting. I know that I'm on my path, because
Yeah.
that's way too random for that,
Yeah.
it's way too random to happen. And you get these little tiny winks. One of my clients actually is in the group was telling me, I talked about silver and how my Native American friends, David Lonebear, he told me that spirit doesn't understand money because it doesn't exist. It's fake, right? The fiat currency. He's like, but it does understand silver. It does understand there's a spiritual weight to silver. So I said, he's like, okay, so pray for silver. So when I did that, somebody sent me 25, this was a few years ago now, 25 coins of silver within like a month. I was like, what the hell? That's crazy. One of my clients did that, says a little prayer, and he gets a 50-cent piece. He goes, like, the next day, he gets a 50-cent piece in the States. That's, I think, I don't know how much percentage of silver. He's like, I've never got one of those in my life. I was like, that's so weird. But it just
Yeah.
shows, I think, at the very least, the intent. Right.
Yeah.
It's starting to be intentional and say, okay, I don't influence everything because there is a greater picture here, but
Hmm.
now I am consciously choosing how I want to play, how I want to show up, how I respond, and I'm accountable for my mistakes so that I can evolve and improve my mental, emotional, and spiritual being on this planet with the time that I have.
Yeah. Well, and I see the same thing playing out when we're in when our minds and when we're feeling happy and energized and alive. Then all of a sudden, you get that email, or you get that phone call, or that opportunity, or the silver arrives. Like, it's just stuff just starts to seems like randomly arrive, but I don't think it's random at all, right? It's because we're on the right path and we're in this state. It's no different than like starting the day off, and I've heard this 1,000 times, like you hit your foot or stub your toe or something, like until you shift that energy, the day is off, and there's going to be more of that coming in, right? So if we can start our days again with with whatever mental fitness works for you, but start our days in a great mood, in a great mindset, then it's just you're operating from a place of abundance in all senses of the word.
Yeah, 100%, because it works both ways, right? You can go by default and everything kind of is like, oh, I stubbed my toe and then this happened, and I'm just a victim, to I'm a
Yeah,
creator. I stubbed my toe. Hold on, wait 1 second. I'm gonna take in a couple of deep breaths. I'm gonna just alchemize this. Now I'm gonna set the intent that the rest of my day will go smoothly. And that's what you do in martial arts. You have to remain calm as someone's punching you in the face, and they might be beating the crap out of you for a whole round or even 2 rounds of the fight or even 4 rounds. But as long as your mind, you've stayed centered, and boom, you
yeah,
get yours, and like, there we go, right? Because the mind is the strongest part, but the second that it gets in your head, you're done. You're
yeah.
not going to be responding to that situation anymore. It's the same with life. It's like those things are just understanding that they're going to happen, and again, applying that little bit of space, the little bit of reflection and intention can change the whole game. Bro, I could talk to you all day. I'm so
Yeah,
stoked
me
that this
too.
book is in reality. There's a lot of other avenues we could go on, but I definitely recommend people check this out, because it's simple brilliance. Like you said, it's very, very simple. The Art of War, that book, the Tao Te Ching, is simple, but they're very brilliant. There's a lot of wisdom that you can take from those, and this journaling practice is so key for people. So I'm just curious, is there anything that you wish that I'd asked or that you want to talk about before we close it out? Because I know you got a few things to do and just want to honor your time.
Yeah, no, not. I mean, I'd just leave listeners with and the viewers with, like, just be open to trying new things, and I think most importantly, just be kind to yourself, right? Like, give yourself some self love. Try some things. Have fun with the prompts. Try practices that you know, or do activities that you know put a smile on your face, and like you really can't go wrong. And if you follow that curiosity, it's just going to lead to so many other beautiful experiences. I mean, yeah, it's just it's something that it's a loop that it just continues to give. So I wish everyone a fun journey down the mental fitness road, and I want to thank you for essentially putting it out in the universe, of setting that intention for this book, as I feel like you were one of the first to really put that out there. So thank you. Here it
Oh
is.
yeah, my pleasure, dude. Well, it had to be a book, so right. Everybody's got their own journey, right? You're the one who had to make this book. I think I was like, bro, you're like the perfect guy. Let's get this book's got to be made. People need, somebody's got to champion this. This can't, die. Just like martial arts, it's like this, process has gone for years. We need new teachers. We need people pushing that forward, right? And so self-reflection and the art of self-reflection, the art of creativity is so important. And ideally, there's going to be more people championing that and promoting
Hmm.
that and the value of that, because it's so important, and it's almost becoming a lost art, right? As they
Yeah.
try to wipe out all these practices that are really good. Where can people? Are you still doing the podcast? Where can people find
Yeah.
your work and your podcast and the book if they want to go get it?
Yeah. One link has it all, and it's also the name of the show. It's called Behind the Human. So behindthehuman.com, you'll see the book is there, the podcast, as well as all the socials and so forth. And I'm accessible. So, I mean, please just shoot me a message. Let me know whether it's book related or not. I mean, let me know any practices or prompts that have really been instrumental in your rituals and routine and lives. Because as you're probably gathering, I'm a bit of a collector of questions and curator of prompts. So I'd love to hear which ones are resonating for you.
Amazing. Well, thanks for writing the book, man. Thanks for making that leap out of big pharma, coming over
Yeah,
here and helping people with their self-reflection processes. But yeah, I can't recommend the book highly enough. A big, huge fan of Mark and his podcast and who he is. So check out the book, and thanks for coming on, brother.
thank you.
All right.